Hello everybody and welcome along to the Rangers Review Saturday show where we are back to talk tactics. Now it's a highly anticipated one this week, I would say, Joshua, because a lot of the chat this week has been around that capitulation. I don't know if capitulation is too strong of a word, at the hands of Celtic last week in that Old Firm derby when Rangers threw away a 2-goal lead to draw 2-2 at Ibrox, of course set against the backdrop of Rangers and Celtic meeting again tomorrow in the Scottish Cup. So there's plenty of questions to be answered. Will Danny Rohl set up the same way? Will Martin O'Neill go from the start the way that he went in the second half? Who can do their plan for the longest, essentially, because the last week it seemed that although Rangers completely won the first half, Celtic completely won the second. But before we go on to tomorrow's game, which we will indeed talk about and how we think the tactics are going to go, Joshua, how are we?
Fine, yeah, I thought we'd be doing a more kind of exuberant, this is what Danny Rohl did right,
Yes.
video at halftime, and you're right, is capitulation too strong a word? Probably not, given how dominant Rangers felt in the first half compared to what happened in the second half. So literally quite a lot to get into.
A lot to get into, indeed, Joshua. We'll start off with last week's game before we talk about tomorrow. And last week was the archetypal game of two halves. I think that very rarely in my life as a football-going fan and then a journalist have I ever felt about a game so differently at half-time as I did the full-time. I think, along with a lot of people, you were going in at half-time last Sunday thinking, all right, Rangers, how many do you want for the afternoon? This could be 4 or 5, if not more than that. People were getting carried away thinking this is total domination. And then by the end of the game, it is a completely different mindset. It's a completely different mood. And everybody has went in a little bit of shock. How has that happened?
Yeah, totally. I think a key point to get across, obviously we're speaking about charts and where players are in the pitch, but hopefully what we try to get across in videos like this, Blair, is that one, we're only predicting what Danny Rohl is doing, and an element of it is analysis. Is obviously opinion based, but also you can't detach all of this from the feel of the stadium. So I think a big issue that Rangers had in that second half. I think if they're away from home, that's obvious, but that second half's a bit easier for them, because when you're at such an emotional high as Rangers were at half time, Yusuf Chermiti is getting applauded down the tunnel, and rightly, as you say, you're going right. Rangers can go for this. They can make this a really historic afternoon, not just an important one. Suddenly, you concede on 55 minutes. That's a terrible time to concede. In many ways, it would probably have been better for Rangers to concede before half time to try and regroup. And then they're in this horrible place of, do we go for a third or do we sit in and protect our lead? So yeah, just important to stress. I think when we're talking about all these different incidents from the game, you cannot detach the tactics from decision makings, from the emotion, from the crowd. All of the factors that I think led to Rangers having a really dominant first half led to them having the second half that they did, and those two things are really linked. We'll bring up the race chart just briefly here, Blair. Every indent, as people probably know in this video by now, depicts a chance, and the higher the indent, the higher the quality of chance.
That's fast becoming one of your catchphrasis on this
What's
show.
that?
The higher the indent, the higher the quality of chance.
Yeah,
Yes.
exciting, I know. Basically, Celtic, because of their penalty, had a better chance of winning that game come full time. The data, I don't think 1.13 expected goals doesn't demonstrate how dominant Rangers were, but that's because Chermiti scores from a kind of low value chance because of that incredible goal. But yeah, very much a game of two halves. And the key point again for me there is in the first half, Rangers were able to set the terms for how the game was played. It was played in their terms. In the second half, Celtic were, and that's why it felt so drastic. So let's go half by half maybe and try and explain what happened.
I think just coming on to what Rangers did well in the first half, you could see from in that game, and it's been something that I've not felt in a stadium for a long time, but it was very obvious that game was getting away from Rangers, and it was very obvious that you could see the tide turning. And I think from a sort of human level, that's where a lot of the frustration has came from this week. We were speaking about it earlier, that this is really the first time that Danny Rohl has been getting quite a lot of criticism this season, and it's the first time that you're actually hearing quite a lot of dissenting voices, and more than just the regular one or two, you actually are getting a bit of a swell of opinion going, oh, he's got that one wrong. And I think it just comes from that frustration where as we spoke about a minute ago, you can't detach the stadium from what's happening on the park. When the fans can see this is turning against us and they're just willing something to change, they're willing the manager to do something, and then they don't quite see that unfold, I think that's where the criticism then comes from.
It's because it's such an unbelievably frustrating game, because that goal changes so much. So I think when you drop a 2-goal lead in an Old Firm game, you just got to take any criticism on the chin,
absolutely.
don't you?
Yeah.
For me, the way I wrote in my piece, Blair, and as people know, the first place to get this analysis is on the website with a subscription. The relevant links are in the detail for that. Rohl wanted to kind of play the protagonist, and the argument before the Hearts game was we've not really seen him implement his game on opponents. Has been very reactive. Even the game at Celtic Park, Rangers win that by being reactive off the ball instead of imposing their game on the ball. In the first half, Rangers' extra man at the top end of the pitch showed, and in the second half, Celtic's extra man in midfield showed.
Yeah.
In the first half, Rangers playing direct, playing vertical, attacking quickly, enabled and helped their approach. In the second half, Rangers' direct play enabled Celtic's approach. So it really like binary black and white for me. If we look at what they did in the first half, very similar to Hearts. We predicted, I think, on the show the day before, myself and Adam thought that it might just be that kind of carbon copy. And yeah, like as I've outlined there, if we pull up the screen grabs for the first goal, both goals featured very similar components to some of those described against Hearts. Playing forward directly once you've got the territory, trying to get a 5 or a line of 6 against Celtic and outnumber them and load the box. First goal here, you can see Manny Fernandez, Blair playing directly from a free kick over the top. And this is the benefit of Rangers' approach, right? You've got two Romans high on the Celtic right back, Araujo. You've got Chermiti, you've got Nadiri, Moore, and Skov Olsen. You've got a 5 against 5. So the downside of playing directly is you maybe have a little bit less control, which we see in the second half. The upside is you can go right over the top of Celtic's press. Obviously, there's a fantastic finish from that makes that goal. But again, look at the numbers in the next image that Rangers have in and around the Celtic final third. I think that's all but John Souttar is there. Rangers happily to press man for man, and basically they were rewarded for their risk. They were rewarded for going with an extra striker instead of an extra midfielder.
Yeah, this is not coming off the back of a free kick when everyone's loaded the box anyway. This is just an attack, and Rangers have got 6 players in the box and 3 players waiting on the edge of the box. So it really is, I think the term is gung-ho. They're absolutely going for it in the early stages of that game.
And I think there's a bit of a narrative after the Celtic want to be a football match, Rangers want it to be a fight. I think that's a gross oversimplification of the fact that Rangers had a lot of look at the 3 players at the edge of the box there. That's their structure off the ball to keep Celtic pinned back in. Look at how Chukwani and Moore and Romans dovetailed on the left, and you had an extra player on the left hand side often while we isolated Skov Olsen on the right hand side. So it was gung ho, and there was an element of direct play about it, but there was a lot of good individual performances, not least Yusuf Chermiti.
Yeah, I don't think that being direct and being physical necessarily equates to not wanting to play football. I just think it is, like we said, that's an ancient trope of the Stokes and the Boltons of this world that didn't ever want to play it and just lump it along. But that is. It's not as necessarily as binary as that. I think it is, you can play good, successful football, but you can also play at speed, you can also play at tempo. You don't have to pass the ball about. And almost this game was the perfect sort of microcosm of the 2 styles, because it showed you that both can work. In the first half, Rangers' more direct physicality absolutely blew Celtic away and they couldn't deal with it. But then when you're playing against a team that is a bit more tired, can't have that control, Celtic's dominance on the ball and their ability to pop it around showed that also has its uses. So it's just almost horses for courses and figuring out, as I said at the top of this video, who can do their plan for longer and maintain that for most of the game.
And who can, again, if we were looking at it analysing it from a Rangers perspective, they're the ones who had the 2-goal lead, which is why it's more. Which, think back to the 3-3 draw they under Philippe Clement against Celtic, because Rangers scored the late goal, they feel like they have the momentum. So that's why it feels as it does naturally. If we look at the second goal, this pass from John Souttar, again, it's a direct ball, it's a channel ball, it's a bit attritional, but it cuts out 6 Celtic players. You get the ball into the final third. Rangers again have that line of 5 to Romans just to your left, kind of almost out of picture. And the reason Dane Murray makes that mistake for me is because he's under pressure. He's got a man at his back. He's got a man in front of him. So the benefit of Rangers' approach, like against Hearts, they were able to implement their game on Celtic. They were able to get the crowd up, play forward directly. But in the second half, you see that pass from Suter, it works because Celtic are on their heels. It works because where Rangers are in the pitch.
Yeah.
There's a big difference in playing that ball, I think, from a distribution point of view to playing it from a clearance point of view. And as we'll come on to look at in the second half, that approach does not work as effectively when you're in the circumstance Rangers are in the second half, which is trying to protect the lead with a nervy crowd.
Yeah, so let's get into that, because there's a little bit of a paradox here, because in the first half, Rangers are not playing tiki-taka football to get the ball out. They are not going long, but they're going long with purpose. They're finding these. They're going over the top with purpose. Yeah. Whereas in the second half, they're still going long, but they're going long out of a sense of panic. They're going long without a purpose. They're going long just to get the ball away. And was it a case of Rangers just stopped doing that as well, or did Celtic change the game so dramatically that Rangers just couldn't do that anymore?
So again, an important point that I wanted to stress watching the game back is that I don't think Rohl tells Rangers to sit off.
No, neither do I.
I don't think he tells them.
Think so.
I think he actually does the opposite. I think he tells them to keep going. The fact that, as we'll come on to look at, he brings Diamandi on to play as a number 10 and not a midfield 3. The fact that he doesn't go to a back 5, much like the Hearts game, I think he was banking on the fact of, I don't know if this crowd, if these players can protect the 1-goal lead. I need to go for another goal. And it can't be stressed enough that that's conceding at that 55th minute. I think it's even 10 minutes too early from a Rangers point of view.
Yeah.
However, as we'll look at, it's their own fault.
Yeah,
for how they concede
it's that time, it's that exact sweet spot for Celtic where it's too early for Rangers to completely sit in, because you're then just inviting pressure for 40 minutes.
Yeah.
But like you said, it's just that point after half time where you can't really get an entirely new plan over to the players, because they're in the heat of the battle, they're in the heat of the Ibrox atmosphere. Trying to completely reshape the team during that, when everyone is just a bit nervy, is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
And this was a point that was pointed out to me on Sunday, actually, that, and we will speak about Jack Butland in a bit, but Rangers started to look as though it was the 85th minute in the game, 20 minutes too early. They started pushing everybody up, just getting rid of it and thinking, just keep the ball out the box. And like you said, that another one of your famous catchphrases, the faster it goes forward, the faster it comes back. Yeah. Rangers were just hoofing it to get it away. It was far too early in the game. They had to have that composure. They had to have somebody to go, lads, we've still got plenty of football to be played here. Let's all calm down. Yeah,
so sometimes people accuse us of playing Football Manager, justifiably so. So let's try and, again, just I think stress the fact that you're saying, can Danny Rohl change it in the heat of the battle? I think it's so difficult to go from the direct approach they had to then go into keep the ball, show composure, because again, you're playing with the crowd, you can't detach it. And if you're a player in the back of your mind, you're thinking, what's worked when I've played it forward quickly, what gets the crowd up when I make a tackle. So these things are linked. And just as Celtic couldn't, because of how Celtic want to play, the first half didn't suit them, because of how Rangers want to play, the second half didn't suit them. First half, second half, you get my point. Celtic made changes as well, so they move Maeda centrally, which I think makes John Suter, I think changes his performance a bit. You look at how he tracks him for the penalty. Suter and Fernandes are both kind of out of position. It pushes the Rangers defence back, I think, because of the space in behind, but also it rushes Jack Butland's clearances. Tenekte improved things in the left wing, gave Celtic a bit of an outball, a bit of a pressure valve, and Rio Hatate brought a composure in possession that calmed his team, which in contrast to what you're speaking about, the distribution from Rangers at the back. So yeah, it's as I said a minute ago, I think so much of football is, I always like to try and compare it to five-a-sides, Blair. And you're playing five-a-sides, you just can't get the ball back because they've got they're a little bit up the pitch or they've got the momentum. I think so much of it is complicated, but as simple as that. Yeah. And Rangers just, as we'll come on to look at, Celtic's extra man in midfield starts to show, but Rangers just could not get up the pitch, and they could not relieve pressure by taking the sting out of the game with the ball.
Yeah, it really it highlighted to me more than I think I've ever seen how much Rangers miss a tempo setter in the middle of the park, because you need someone that's brave enough to be able to slow the game down. You need someone that's brave enough to be. It's Barry Ferguson encapsulated. I remember watching Barry Ferguson at Ibrox. He could put his foot in the ball and stop the game if he wanted to. That is the kind of ability and the kind of presence you need in a game like this. Stephen Davis was the same. Stephen Davis would sit at laterally, anchor that midfield, and could know when to slow it down, would know when to speed it up, would know when to how to dictate the tempo. Rangers don't have that. And because they don't have that, they have to play this sort of high octane physical. Okay, let's just try and overpower them. And I think that Danny Rohl, again, in his sort of naivety, just tried to do that for as long as possible, and it ran out of steam essentially.
Yeah, I think, and Rangers also tired, which is important to stress too. But I just wonder when Rohl's sitting back looking at that game, how much it. As a manager, you also do need, as you say, a midfielder to just go, and we're going to look at an example.
Yeah,
I think
which is what Hatate gave to Celtic.
Yeah,
because he came on and he completely went, right, okay, I'm now the metronome in this game. I'm going to decide what pace this game is played at.
Yeah, and Rangers needed someone to calm things down. So what changes in the second half? Celtic's extra midfielder starts to show. So the first image we've got here, Blair, under point 4 in your notes, hopefully, is an image of 3 Celtic midfielders highlighted and 3 Rangers midfielders highlighted.
Yeah.
Diomande comes on, but he doesn't come on to play in midfield necessarily. He does drop a bit when Rangers have the ball, but then frustratingly, Rangers still play long. So that feels, again, like counterintuitive because they're still trying to play direct to one striker after Ryan Nadiri comes off. But you look at Rio Hatate here.
And just, sorry, before you go into Rio Hatate, there's no excuse for that from a Rangers perspective, because they now have 2 sixes. There's passes to be found there, but they're shelling it over their heads because they're scared. Yeah, essentially.
And the theory of like the sadly not my saying, it's from a far greater football mind than me. The faster the ball goes forward, the faster it comes back. Yeah. That point is just you think you're clear in danger, but so often you're giving away control. And again, we'll look at an example of that in a moment. But this one first example, you can see Hatate. Celtic have this 3v2 in the midfield, and as Rangers press starts to tie, or as Celtic start to get up the pitch, that starts to show. So the game is now being their advantage of the extra man in the middle is now being seen. Hatate, as we move forward, misses this shot, but again, look at the space that is at the edge of the box.
Both those frames there, there's no one near him.
Yeah, which is the worry. But why is that happening, Blair? Well, let's look at a couple more graphs that show the point. Watching the game back, if we move forward to the clip, it's on 50 minutes and 15 seconds. Hatate's about to whip one out to the Celtic right-hand side. I honestly think this is a key turning point in the game, because Rangers are still trying to press aggressively, and they're still trying to keep the game in the final third, at that, high away from their goal, to keep Celtic on their heels and Rangers on their toes. Raskin's just a little bit short to Hatate. Celtic play out under pressure. They get up the pitch, and I think that gives them confidence. And I think it hits Rangers' confidence. Play develops. Rangers actually recover quite well. Raskin has to cover these huge distances. And the third frame here, 50 minutes, 31 seconds. This is when you need, I think, a midfielder to put their foot on the ball. But what Raskin does instead is he tries to clear the ball quickly, and it's intercepted by Cal McGregor. That's, I think, where the game changes, because suddenly Rangers are panicking instead of trying to... their direct play is harming them instead of helping them. What happens from here? Celtic have a little bit more play around the box for the next 10 seconds. And the next frame you can see is Dujon Sterling, again, clearing the ball directly. A little bit of a blurry frame here, but what you should be able to see is Nadiri and Chermiti up front with a huge distance to the rest of the team. Liam Scales hooks the ball away from Nadiri. And look at Nadiri there. He's got his arms out. He's saying, where's the rest of the team? Yeah. So the gap now is too big. Yeah. And as we'll come on to look at, Rangers' use of the ball doesn't allow them to build beyond it. Yeah. But also their press is disconnected, because the top half of the team is still going, right, let's get after them. Yeah. But because Raskin's been simultaneously chasing Hatate at that end of the pitch, trying to clear the ball it just becomes disconnected. Yeah. And that's when the spaces start to appear for Celtic, I think.
When you're 50 minutes in of pressing with the intensity that Danny Rohl has sent them out to do, Nico Raskin can't cover vertical laps of the pitch 3 times in the space of a minute.
Yeah.
Because he just hasn't got the legs there anymore. And that's maybe why when you bring Diomande on and you put him further up front, you go, why have you not put him into midfield and then potentially supplementing the legs in there? Because Diomande as a sort of second striker, just in hindsight, it didn't work. It didn't have the desired effect. And whether that's something that Danny Rohl will look back on and think, and it will be interesting tomorrow if a similar situation unfolds, how Danny Rohl would adopt that and whether he would put down Diomande in a more advanced position again, because I don't think he'll ever do that again in a big game.
Hindsight's great, isn't it? Yeah. And again, it's so easy to Danny Rohl's forgotten more about football in the last 2 days than
we will ever know.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and again, I think it's important to stress in these videos that it's not it's trying to understand how the flow of the game happened. But you're right. He said in his press conference that there was a few moments we didn't make the most of, and there is one moment that Rangers win the ball through press and about, I can't remember if it's 3-0. Obviously, Two Romans has that big chance just after half-time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Scott Olsen has a shot, and the momentum is still with Rangers for 5 minutes. But they had a couple of pressing moments where he felt then, I think it's when Raskin wins the ball, Rangers play back instead of going forward. So I think from his point of view, he probably wants to defend proactively, which is why he keeps Diomande there, because he wants to keep Celtic pressed up the pitch.
Yeah.
However, if we're still on this Nadiri frame, Blair, what happens from this point? This is I think Celtic scoring about 55 minutes. Rangers get up the pitch once in that 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Butland kicks the ball out of play. Celtic have 3 shots, 3 corners. And now because Celtic are the ones who are pressing forward, the defence are higher up the pitch, Rangers just can't get up. This is where they're stuck. I think it's hard to change the plan because it's 60 minutes. It's a dangerous scoreline. And this next image, this is on... where is it? 60 minutes.
Yeah, it's just on the hour mark. 5 minutes or so after they've scored.
So Rangers are still trying to press aggressively. And in this situation, they make the distances. Sinisalo kicks out and they get a big applause from Danny Rohl. But look at where Raskin and Chukwueze are.
Yeah.
They're in the box. So when Chukwueze makes that, is that a mistake? He can't block the late cross from James Forrest. That's why for me, because such big distances, because Rangers couldn't control it. They're going from back to front because they're going up front to try and press Celtic and stop them and regain the ball. But then because they don't have any control, they constantly have to make these big runs back towards their goal.
It constantly, for me, comes back to this point of nobody on the park being able to organise things.
Yeah.
Because that frame there, where you've got Nico Raskin and Chukwueze way ahead of Yusuf Chermiti, way ahead of Scott Olsen, and that should be your anchoring too.
But I think that's fine. I'm going to stop. I think that's fine.
But I don't think. Stop me if I'm wrong here. But they don't look to be pressing in any cohesive manner.
Well,
it's essentially 3 people running down on the goalkeeper.
Nah. So what the frame shows is, but the goalkeeper kicks it out of play. So I don't think the frame here is the issue, because Nadiri is blocking the pass out to Dane Murray, and Sinisalo kicks out of play. Right. Chukwuane's been tracking, I think, McGregor, and he's kept his run onto the goalkeeper. Raskin's jump with Hatate. That from a pressing point of view, I don't think Danny Rohl minds that, because again, it's so important to stress. You can't have the full-blooded, let's go for it, bodies in the box, and not have some risk attached to that with your midfielders out of position. The question is, can you keep the game at that end of the pitch instead of having these 2 guys then have to... when we see why is Hatate free for a shot at the edge of the box a few minutes earlier, that's why, because it's just big distances.
So what is the answer to this then, Josh? Because essentially you're saying Chukwueze has ran his race by the end of the game, and that's why he can't quite make these decisions that stop Celtic scoring. Does he not press as much as this at this time in the game, or does he have to be replaced?
I think that's the difficult bit we're speaking of. Rangers are stuck between, do we change our approach? Do we go for a zonal midfield 3 and be really compact and risk Ibrox being a bit anxious for half an hour as we give Celtic the ball? Or do we press and try and score a 3rd goal? And I just think that's I don't know is the answer, but I think that's the middle ground. It's just not as simple as saying...
I think, personally, he's gambled to try and get the 3rd for the whole game.
Which is what he did against Hearts, and it worked. But obviously it didn't work on this occasion.
It's like I spoke about in that piece that I did about Jedi Gisama in the Hearts game. I think if Jedi Gisama doesn't go on that run and make it 4-2, that game could very easily finish 3 each. for me because Rangers just needed that one to take it over the line.
Yeah.
See if the Rangers get a third at any point on Saturday, game's done.
Yeah.
It's game over.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, just couldn't get that third goal over the line, and then all of a sudden comes the inquest about Danny Rohl's tactics.
Yeah, and that, yeah, exactly. So, kind of final point we have to look at is the kicking. I think Rangers' biggest issue is their use of the ball. How much is this instructive? How much is this nerves? Because we've seen this pattern in so many Old Firm games. I don't know. Butland only completed 34% of his passes after the break. That's a bit of a false stat to a degree because at points he is clearing it, at points he is under pressure. But if we throw up the map here, yellow is unsuccessful passes, red is successful passes. Quite often that gave the ball back to Celtic instead of starting the Rangers attack. So again, what worked for him in the first half then starts to count against him in the second. And the one example we've got here, Blair, of a Butland kick that, fair enough, Daisameda is closing him down. Daisameda is a very effective presser, and he changed the game a lot by going up front. It's just, again, it's a difference in approach because what you see here with Celtic is probably their centre-back split and you get a bit more control to go up the pitch. But that pass goes into Liam Scales, right to Liam Scales. So that's the idea of the faster the ball goes forward, the faster it comes back.
Yeah.
Because Rangers aren't set up to defend that. You can see where their players are. I think you can see Nico Raskin with his hands out. And it would have been intriguing to be a fly on the wall in the dressing room to see how much was the plan followed, how much was it deviated from. But again, I just think because of when they conceded, there was this disconnect of players going, this worked for us in the first half, we need to keep doing it to get the crowd up. But also that approach didn't allow them to manage the game because however much we try and understand and explain our way around it, you're absolutely right. You can't lose a 2-goal lead in an Old Firm game if you want to win a title, especially when you're at home.
Do you expect Jack Butland in that situation, being the experienced player that he is, to have a bit more composure then and to go, rather than just push everyone up? Like I said, he was pushing everyone up for about half an hour to go. And that is what you do in the last 5 minutes of the game.
Yeah.
Should he, even when Celtic score, go, all right, I'm going to keep looking for this pass. I'm going to keep looking for the pass into the midfield, pop it out wide, change the angle. Okay, Rangers have got the ball again. Because I don't remember Rangers having any sustained period of possession in the entire of that second half.
But we've not seen that under Rohl. And I personally won't go... I think that's difficult to implement mid-season. And people say, look at what Motherwell are doing. Yeah, absolutely. But they play one way. They've not had European games and they've had the ability to really coach that. We've only really seen Danny Rohl's idea in recent weeks with this 2 strikers up top. If this is this time next year and Rangers can't keep the ball at all in an Old Firm game, then I think you're going, that's worrying.
To be fair, I'm not asking for 200 passes.
Yeah.
I'm just asking for, instead of just going long and then potentially going straight out of play.
Yeah.
You just want to give it to one of the 3 in midfield at this point, because you do have Diamanda, you've got Raskin, you've got Chukwueze. Surely one of them is shown for the pass.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a moment where just after Diamanda comes on, where he does drop in midfield, but the ball still goes long, and then Celtic have the 2 defenders to Yusuf Chumiti. So is it chicken and egg that if Butland shows a bit of composure one time, his team drops, and then, as you say, maybe it's not about completely playing through the press, but it's just about having some space to play into,
giving everyone a breather. Really,
that's it, mate. Because there was no way to rest because they weren't really set up to like defend in a low block, were they? Because they're jumping all the time. Do we stay? Do we go? Much like the first half at Parkhead. I think that the best way to describe that game is if Rangers concede that Tierney header on 45 minutes, I don't think there is. I think their approach in the second half is different. Yeah. So now looking ahead to next week, tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's intriguing to see how it goes. I think Danny Rohl will still try and overpower Celtic in the first half. It wouldn't shock me to see Rangers try and overpower Celtic and then go for the kind of compact 4-3-3 that we saw at Parkhead. It also wouldn't shock me if it goes right. The only way we're going to grow as a team is if we keep trying to do it on our terms. So let's work out what we did wrong, fix all these little bits and bobs, and then try and do the same thing again. But absolutely fascinating, because as much as Rangers couldn't deal with the second half, Celtic couldn't deal with the first half. So then how do they approach it?
Yeah.
Bit of a game of cat and mouse.
This is my point from earlier. It's almost a case of both teams had really, really strong halves on their own terms. So it's a case of who can do their plan for longer.
Yep.
Who can make their plan stick for longer.
Yep.
Rangers would obviously ideally like to start the same way, absolutely go for it, get another lead in the bag, and then, okay, how do we secure the lead? What I would think is you've then got the thing now where it's almost like, to use a cricket analogy, when do they notice enough? When do they go, okay?
I don't know anything about cricket.
Okay, well, so they get a 2-0 lead, or they get a 1-0 lead.
Right, okay.
Do they, if they're 1-0 up on the hour mark,
right, do they change?
do they then start thinking?
Yeah.
Do
And
they
how
then
does the
start
crowd
thinking?
play into that, right?
If they're 2-0 up, do they? If 2-0 up at half time, do they then sit in? What is the scoreline now where Rangers are going to go, oh, we want to start defending this? That'll be the really, really key point if Rangers do take the lead tomorrow. If Celtic take the lead, I think it's going to be nervy. It's going to be nervy, and I think that you're going to have a tough Ibrox. But I do think that gives Danny Rohl carte blanche to go, okay, let's just put 6v5 against their backline and absolutely go for the equaliser. So I don't know. I don't know how this game pans out. I think it's even harder to call than it was the week before, because I think we knew roughly we knew that Rangers were going to go and attack Celtic. We knew that Celtic were going to play with the injuries that they had and the way they were going to start the game. I would be stunned if Rio Hatate doesn't start.
Yeah.
I think that he absolutely plays in the middle of the park with Callum McGregor. I think that Diaz Maida plays as a centre forward. I think that Taneke comes in from the start. All these players made such a difference for Celtic. But what that equally does is, if Rangers can blow them away in the first half,
Are they tired?
Celtic have got nothing in the second half.
Yeah,
because their subs are so much weaker than those first team players.
I think Rangers team will probably be the same.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that.
Although I do think that there is a case that maybe Nasser Giga, if you're Nasser Giga, you're saying,
I think that's one. I think that's one for the birds. So I don't think that's going to happen. We like to talk about that because it's a talking point, and maybe John Souttar, but I don't think there's any realistic world that John Souttar gets dropped for an
maybe not, because he's wearing the captain's armband as well. But
what I will say, Josh, is something that I would absolutely like to see, is that as soon as you take Yusuf Chermiti's strike partner off him on Sunday, he comes off as well.
Who'd you play though?
Or you play Majovski with him. You do not at any point on Sunday play Yusuf Chermiti on his own.
Yeah, but then he played on his own at Celtic Park because he had space to transition into. So I think you don't play him isolated. So the reason Diamande comes on is because Nadiri is like almost a number 10 in this system. Miovski's not. Miovski's not someone who's going to drop 1 second balls. Like, look at the pass Nadiri plays for Romans round the corner. So I think what you will see is maybe then you go with Mikey Moore and Gassama or Skov Olsen close to Chermiti, so he's not isolated. I agree with you, though, you can't have that complete disconnect between trying to press and kind of sitting off. And the way I summed it up in my piece was the upside was seen in the first 50 minutes, direct attacks, numbers high up the pitch, vertical routes forward, and an overwhelming presence in the box. The downside from that point, long balls became a weakness, and when Cam was needed, panic followed. That's how I'd sum up the game. Intriguing to see what happens tomorrow.
Yeah, and what we don't want to look past is the fact that Rangers were so good in that first half. Mikey Moore was magnificent.
Oh, he was so good.
It's
a real crying shame
that
that we should have been spending this video talking about Chermiti's goal,
Yeah,
which is the best goal I've ever seen in the stadium.
The first goal is
silly,
inexplicable.
Silly.
It's a silly goal. The second goal, I think I actually shouted in the press box, "What a touch!" when he put it round Araujo, and then he actually finished it, which was even more unbelievable. Two incredible goals that I think that it'll probably take a Rangers title win for fans to actually be able to enjoy them properly, because right now there's people don't want to watch the game back, they don't want to go back on the hurt, and it's football, you know what I mean? If Celtic take a 2-0 lead and Rangers hit back and Yusuf Chermiti scores that bicycle kick in the 90th minute to salvage a point, what a day it is.
I don't know.
It just happens in the wrong order.
Yeah.
That, unfortunately, is the way that football goes, the way that narratives go. But I think you're right in that Rangers were so good in the first half that they can hold on to that and they can go, well, let's just do that again.
But manage it
and
better.
hopefully do it for longer.
And then what if Celtic are better? So many variables. So Yeah, let's see what happens.
Indeed. And of course, like Josh has been saying, all of this information is available on the website in the piece that Joshua has written. He's gone into even more in depth with even more graphics and charts and screen grabs. If you can believe it, there's even more in there, and you can get that by subscribing to the Rangers Review website. It's the best place for all your Rangers journalism with the best breaking news and analysis like this every week. Joshua does one of these analysis pieces, and we try to follow up with a little chat about it here on the podcast, and I thoroughly enjoy it. I feel like I always learn something, even if I don't want to chat to you this week. It is still enjoyable to learn about maybe why things went right, why things went wrong, and gives you a little bit of a better understanding of the game. But for now, that'll do us. We were looking forward to the game tomorrow. We'll be there in our droves as Rangers take on Celtic once again in the Scottish Cup. If you're going, we hope it's a wonderful afternoon. But for now, thanks for watching and thanks for listening.